Good morning to everyone. Until now, we have discussed and we have had some good examples of the role that universities play and should play in the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies, the provision of access to justice for all, and the building of effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions. In this panel, we will deepen the conversation on a key aspect of this: public policies that enhance or limit, sometimes also limit, the ability of universities to contribute to meeting the SDG 16. We will take into consideration the new context in which the universities operate and a paradoxical situation. The new context refers to the growing importance of public regulation for universities. For centuries, the academic world was self-referential. Academic standards on excellence, university regulations, the type of studies to offer were decided within the academic sphere. Today, the situation has changed. Universities are subject to strong public regulation and control, for better and for worse. For better, there are clearer standards on what to expect from a university, and therefore universities have to be accountable to citizens. For worse, perhaps, we have lost flexibility and capacity for innovation, despite the persistent discourse about innovation. The second point, that was the paradoxical situation, refers to the role of universities in improving governance and the quality of institutions. If we take the World Bank governance indicators, the 6 indicators, as a good proxy for the situation of SDG 16 at the country level, it is clear that the most problematic countries do not have a good representation in the academic rankings. If universities have an important role in improving the situation, it is a very bad news for the people living in countries with poor governance, because it is very unlikely that universities in their countries can make a great contribution. Then we have a complex context. On the one hand, universities in countries with strong enough institutions need to comply with government regulations and should align themselves with public policies focused on strengthening universities' impact on the well-being of their own country. On the other hand, the neediest people and countries cannot rely on the contribution of the universities. In this context, we have a great panel to discuss these issues. Some young but very experienced people, and a very experienced man here, young also young. Emir Ganić is the chief executive of the Sarajevo School of Science and Technology. It's a relatively new university, but playing an important role in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Carmen Pombo is also the chief executive and the founder of the Fernando Papa Foundation, working on human rights and the importance of the law for vulnerable people. And José Gómez is the spokesperson of the Crue, the Conference of Rectors of the Spanish Universities, and he was also the rector of the University of Cantabria and has a vast experience in the management of universities. Then I would like to start with a general question for the three, and then you can introduce a little bit more yourself and your work regarding this topic. And it is a question about the public policies. What kinds of public policies foster universities' responsiveness to those challenges, to these world challenges, and how those such policies connect the national demands, usually more concern about the national needs, with the needs of the people that is in most vulnerable situation.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is turned on, so can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. First, I'd like to just briefly give a little bit of context about our institution and where we operate in Bosnia-Herzegovina. As I'm quite sure all of you are quite aware of the fall of Yugoslavia in '93 and then the succession states that have arisen from that. So trying to first of all compare and contrast what higher education in Bosnia was like before and what it is now. If we look at, for example, as we mentioned earlier, the triple helix of the cooperation between governments, industries, and education, which was very strong pre-conflict in Bosnia-Herzegovina, has completely dissolved now. And for a statistic I could mention is prior to the war, it was around 2.3% of our GDP was invested towards research and development in higher education, and post-war, so since 97, 98, that figure has gone down to 0.2%. So there we see the initiative or the lack of initiative for our government to invest in higher education at all, which creates a very hard playing field for us to implement progression and various SDG initiatives, obviously. Also, one very important fact to mention is that as a population of 3 million, of how much we have in Bosnia, we operate around just under 100 higher education institutions, which is obviously an extremely saturated higher educational market. And this is because it's highly unregulated. The higher education institutions, there is until recently not been a governing body that oversees the functioning of universities. But since it has been introduced, we are now being able to kind of level the playing field and provide much more high quality institutions and educations to students. Why is this very important in terms of this topic? Is because there was, up until from after the war, up until maybe 3 years ago, a hyperinflation of diplomas, degrees, which were of very poor quality, which in essence we realized when we were developing our university that it would cause a ripple effect in terms that there would be a production of engineers, scientists, medical doctors, economists that would have very poor education and that would in time infiltrate themselves in various government institutions, which would further undermine the development and the functioning of Bosnia and Herzegovina as a whole. So looking at a sort of social responsibility, we developed the Sarajevo School of Science and Technology with our partner, the University of Buckingham in the UK, where we have taken over their degree program, a number of obviously foreign professors, and we try to foster excellence and develop engineers and students employed in various industries that will make an impact in tomorrow's shaping of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And in that respect, because we are a private but non-for-profit institution that is not regulated by the government at all, we have a very independent say of who we hire. So we hire the best experts. We have a say in what type of research projects we are going to take part in, and we gear those towards, because we have a very tight cooperation with OSCE, so Office of the High Representative as well, and UNDP in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and jointly we organize conferences and teaching to raise awareness and also implement through funding of UN and various other EU projects these various initiatives that we can later on talk about. So that's just a brief general outline of the ecosystem Sarajevo School of Science and Technology is operating in, but obviously we will talk more about this later.
You can.
Thank you very much. Obviously, your experience is of great interest for all of us, and I'm just a human rights lawyer, Spanish human rights lawyer, but I have 3 different hats that I will explain briefly. So one, I run the Fernando Papa Foundation, which is a foundation of a multinational law firm, Spanish law firm, dedicated to the poor through the legal profession. So we're basically a rule of law foundation. That is one hat. Another hat is I'm a director of the LexisNexis Rule of Law Foundation. LexisNexis is a listed company in New York and listed also in London, and it has like over 300,000 employees, and basically what we do is rule of law projects throughout the world. And also I run the Rule of Law Forum of the International Bar Association, which is a big international association of lawyers with over 80,000 lawyers. So I basically work with lawyers and with rule of law. So in this context, SDG 16 is really what I do and what I work for, and in connection with universities and public policies, I have tried to address this whole conference, having a look at universities in 3 angles. One, universities as enterprises, how universities are run like a corporation. 2, universities as the future of society, how they build sustainable societies through students and through the leaders of the future, and then awareness raising and mentorship and all of the research. And then 3, through how universities do advocacy and also defending. And also I think a lot about law faculties, especially because it's really my field. There are obviously many, and you know much more than me in this, many examples of initiatives in the university field trying to do projects like the International League of Universities Against Poverty, or the Singularity Project, the Singularity University to address world problems, or Universia, which is also addressing many topics related with SDG 16. So there are many initiatives, but why are we still talking about this here, and why are we here? Because we know there are much more to be done. In relation with universities as enterprises, obviously this is a matter very close to my heart because it's in connection with business and human rights, which is something I teach and we are trying to develop in the legal profession. How can you do, well, it's really related with the previous conversation in connection with diversity, inclusion, all sort of policies that you can have inside, but not only develop the policies, but also make all the mechanisms so that they actually work, and that you follow all those policies and make sure that you're accountable for them and you're transparent on how you work on those. And I would not go very far on those. And then universities as the future of society, it's really all of the teaching that you do, and you're much better than that. But in the foundation, Fundación Fernando Papa, we have a project on that, and we've been teaching rule of law and business and human rights for the last 10 years, and this is something that is very close to us, and maybe we can talk about that later if you're interested. But one main thing that we do, and we think it's very related with SDG 16 and public policies, which I actually think public policies don't always come before, sometimes they come after the reality. They don't always impose what is necessary, but sometimes what's necessary generates the policies. Sometimes it's not always before. Are the legal clinics, which is something that in Spain has come a bit later than in other jurisdictions, more Anglo-Saxon. In Spain has only started like in the last 5-10 years, maybe we can have a conversation about that later. So legal clinics has been extremely relevant for SDG 16, for access to justice, and for some of the indicators of SDG 16. And I think more or less that was the context of what we do. Yeah.
Okay. José has the...
Well, thank you very much for the organization of this exciting forum to invite Crue to be here. I am just representing the Conference of Rectors of Spain. I was former rector of the University of Cantabria and president of the sectorial of research and transfer of the Crue for 4 years. Then I will speak here in the name of Crue, but also in my own name. You know, I will transmit you a little bit what I think about all these topics and the universities. I will explain a little bit which is the Spanish system of universities, which is not maybe not well known for all the people. But let me start increasing the number of citation of two authors. The first one is absolutely necessary to be cited here because is Antonio Vieira. Antonio Vieira was a Jesuit of the 17th century. He was in Brazil, and it was one of the best writers of this century in Portuguese language. And he said, abraçaram-se a justiça e a paz, e foi a justiça a primeira que concorreu para este abraço, porque não é a justiça que depende da paz, como alguns tomam por excusa, senão a paz da justiça. That means justice and peace, they embrace each other. And it was justice that first saw this because it is not justice that depends on peace, as some take as excuse, but the peace depends on justice. I think it's a very beautiful way to start this discussion about peace and justice. Peace depends on justice. And the second one is the second citation is about Eric Maskin, which is a Nobel Prize of Economy in 2007. He say, again, I believe that the best way to deal with the inequality, the difference between different countries, inequality in countries, and even in the persons, is through education. Education can be considered as public good, and it's good for me because I have better skills and knowledge, but also for society, especially democratic societies, work much well with educated citizens. I think that these two sentences explain a lot of things, justice and education. And justice and education must be the words in what the university must work. I think, trying to answer a little bit your questions, is that we must change the old concept of cooperation. I think that to attack the inequality, we must know that the universities are not ONG for charity. The universities is an actor of the collaboration and education to promote the justice. And this is the way that the university must work. The university must extend the knowledge created in his classrooms and in labs and laboratories to benefit the society and contribute as an important instrument to the social, technical, economic, and cultural development of the advanced societies. Universities is integrated in the regions, especially out of the bigger cities, because the big universities were not connected to the bigger cities or the bigger countries, maybe it's different, has its own value as the motor of the social, cultural, and economic cohesion. For example, we are thinking in a program that started in Spain 10 years ago or 12 years ago about the Campus of Excellence. Campus of Excellence was a very, very nice idea because they connect different universities with regions and try to develop a bigger and the competitiveness and the skills of the different universities, the competences and so on. Problem is that after the program came the crisis, and it was just beautiful words at the beginning. Well, all of this, even we can think now in the project of the what we call European universities, that we are working in the different universities to connect the different universities in Europe to develop different countries and different programs and so on. Well, I think that all this framework is characterized by the autonomy, independence and professionalization of science, and freedom of thought and criticism, which constitute the keys of the modern university. But all these things you must take into account, and when you spoke about the transfer knowledge of the universities, we are in some way thinking in technological transfer, and this is wrong. The universities give a transfer to the society, speaking in the wide world of society, not only with technological approach, but also with social, with humanities, with arts even, and all this must be taken into account. And the value of the universities is also how this transfer, taken as a whole, influence in the society. And in this way, I am speaking about the society, not only the local society, but also the global society, also the other countries. And this is the idea. I think that the universities must be, in some way, locally compromised, but globally competitive to make all the words and all the work that they must do. I think that for the first speaking, that's all right. Okay, and we can continue later speaking about different projects and so on.
Thank you very much to the three of you. Now, we are going to go a little deeper in your own experience in the relationship of you as universities with the government and with public regulations, and in the case of Carmen, in your engagement with universities. Emir, you have the experience of building a new university during the last 20 years, and in parallel to build a new state, a completely new state in a difficult context, in a post-conflict context. How has the relationship been between the university and the government? Mm-hmm. And what has the role of the university been in this building a new state?
Right. Unfortunately, again, I have to give a slightly political introduction to how our country is now compromised. I don't know how many of you know, Bosnia and Herzegovina is, for example, the only country that has 3 presidents. So when Bosnia separated from Yugoslavia, because you had 3 constituent people, you had the Croats, you had the Serbs and the Bosnians, and the Dayton Peace Agreement, if some of you have heard of it, left us with a state where we have a 4-year presidential mandate, but in those 4 years you have 3 presidents from each one of the people rotating every number of months. So what this means for the country is that even in the educational system, you could see regions of Bosnia and Herzegovina that were that started to group those ethnical groups back into their own small ecosystems. And you had many universities that were 90% predominantly Serbian students, others 80–90% predominantly Croatians, and again, the Bosnians. So what we wanted to do from the very beginning is to create a multi-ethnic institution, both in terms of our staff and especially in terms of our students. And we have succeeded to a great degree. We are a small university. We only have around 1,200 students and some 220 staff employed, but the numbers of the ethnic groups represented are fairly even. And this has allowed us to show by example. And when applying for various grants, even though internally in terms of the grants for education and research, as I said, are only 0.2 of our GDP, it has given us a lot of support by foreign NGOs, because we are such a multi-ethnic institution, to provide us with grants, funds to continue research in fields which support SDGs. Just actually 2 weeks ago, we had a sort of computer science hackathon, because I don't know how many of you have visited, for example, Sarajevo. We are similar to Bilbao in a valley. We have big problems with pollution, for example. So together with UNDP and our university, we organized a hackathon of all the high schools in Bosnia for students through a 7-day exercise to start to develop new ideas on how to, for example, solve the pollution of Sarajevo. Furthermore, what we identified, I'm sure all of you have heard of the PISA results, of the tests that have come out recently. Bosnia and Herzegovina has ranked very low, 62nd on the list. And again, as being a socially responsible university, what we were triggered to do then was open a number of private high schools across Bosnia and Herzegovina under the umbrella of Sarajevo School of Science and Technology, targeting the 3 capital areas of those various 3 ethnic groups, and introducing not state and national programs, but international baccalaureate programs and A-level programs as well, to provide students with a broad range of current non-ethnical curriculums to foster their further development. As we said at the beginning, unfortunately, being a private university, we do not get much support from the government in any way. The one problem is that also government has infiltrated itself very much in the choosing of the representatives, rectors of state universities as well. So as political parties change, heads of state universities, which are the biggest ones, so it's very extremely hard to integrate and work with them on certain initiatives that better the country. So we are first going through the process of, as I said, developing a multi-ethnic university, trying to get foreign NGOs to work with us, lead by example, and more importantly, establish this, again, triple helix by trying to vertically integrate. So, for example, for all the programs we offer, for example, medical studies, computer science, and so on, we have been able to devise through these grants our own private clinic or our own science park that allows these students to connect directly to the industry by being part of our university, and in that way get this more global and broad education, which ultimately, I'm not saying we're trying to bypass the government, but we are trying to show them that we are fulfilling our goals much better than their state-run universities and getting a lot more recognition for it and producing extremely, extremely high-quality students.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is an interesting topic that later we can discuss. Carmen, you are working globally, promoting human rights and responsible lawyering with a special interest in the rights of vulnerable people. Trying to think positively about your experience, what are the main factors that foster a fruitful collaboration with universities? You have or are also involved in the university because you teach frequently in the university. But beyond teaching, and teaching is an important part of it, what are the main factors that you think that help to engage with universities to foster these human rights and the strengthening of institutions?
I think the clearest example where this collaboration has worked better is in legal clinics. I have some examples. One, not all of them were successful and not all of them have worked well, but I think we always come with some main points that we can see where if we had done some major issues, then it would have worked. So let me put an example. With the LexisNexis Rule of Law Foundation, we had this major funder giving us money to build a legal clinic in Azerbaijan, in Baku University, to do a legal clinic on business and human rights. So the university was very happy, but we had a major problem with the government because business and human rights was not the topic that they wanted the legal clinic to focus on. So this is one example. Another example was another legal clinic that we were establishing in Indonesia, and the topic of the legal clinic that we were establishing was on gender-based violence. And because in Indonesia there is a strong, well anyway, the university was very happy and everything, but then again with the local government we had some issues about that. What is our experience with legal clinics in Spain? It varies. We've had many different, and we've worked with 8 or 9 different legal clinics. And at the end of the day, I think the conclusion of the question, what I have to say, is that the key to foster responsible lawyering and to foster real human rights is that we collaborate jointly, the public administrator, the funders, the university, and not only the NGOs, because NGOs normally have to be involved in legal clinics, but also the industry. And when I talk about the industry here, is the legal profession. When you align the objectives of all of those, then the project works. And very often we find challenges in that. So funders, public administration, university, NGOs, and industry align the objectives of everyone is what I find would be the key for a potentially optimal project.
In your experience, what are the main challenges that you find?
That everyone has a different agenda, and not everyone is thinking really on social impact. Maybe the university is looking for excellence and very good research, and that doesn't necessarily fit the NGO objective. The administration is looking for something else. Everybody has a different agenda, so aligning everything into, say, SDG 16 is really everyone's commitment into wanting just one core objective. And for that you need will and agreement. And it's just a matter of agreeing.
Okay, thank you very much. Jose, you have a vast experience in university management and in playing a mediating role between the universities and government officials. You have also worked to shape public policies on research and knowledge transfers. To what extent do you think that public policies affect universities' ability to innovate in this field? And perhaps you can tell a little bit also about your experience shaping the sexennials.
Well, this is a very interesting question, of course. I would like to start to show exactly how is the Spanish system of universities. In Spain, there are 51 public universities and 30 private universities. I think that private universities, there are some public universities, they are very good universities. For example, the University of Deusto, the University of Comillas, the University of Navarra, the University of Raymond Llull, etc. But we can not say the same thing for other private universities. The public universities depends of the autonomous communities. Then it depends so much of the sensibility of the local governments about the university. What the local governments thinks about the university, which is the role that the university could play in the local governments, and this make a very large diversity of the system in Spain. There are nothing to do the Catalan system of universities with the Andalus system or with the Basque system and so on. It's not the central government that gives exactly the funds to the universities. Then we depend directly of the local governments, and this is in some ways is good, in other ways it depends of the sensibility of the system. But in any case, I think that in the last times, the Spanish university, for example, has increased a lot, for example, in research and in publication. And one of the causes of this increase in publication, I think that now Spain is the 10th country by number of publications in the world, or 9, 10, something like that. But I think that the origin of that was 30 years ago, when from the central government of Spain, they say, well, we will give a bonus, an economic bonus, for all these professors of the university that reach a level of publications. And then at this moment, everybody was starting to publish in good quality and so on. And then the number of publications in Spain increased a lot. It's not the case for the transfer. The transfer, technology transfer, they continues to be quite low in general. And this is why Crue asked himself what can do with this. And that we are working in a project which is not now a project, but it's a pilot plan, which is just starting, to evaluate also the transfer of the universities to the society. But the transfer understood not only as technological transfer, but as said before, in the humanities, in the arts, in the law, in the economies, in the social economy, etc. And then looking not only at the numbers of the transfer, one transfer, two transfer, no, but looking to the impact of this transfer in the society. It is very difficult to evaluate that, but we are trying to do it. We are trying to do it. And for example, we can see, I can say an example because we are here in the Deusto University. The impact of the Deusto University in the Basque Country, in the society of the Basque Country, is enormous, because there are the formation of many people. He's now in the industries, in the governments, in the law, the lawyers, economists, etc. He has been formed here. The first transfer of the universities to the society is the people he's formed in the universities. That's clear. This is the first important transfer. And then I think that even when Deusto was the first university here in Bilbao, before that the public university of the Basque Country, which is quite young. I can give more examples of this. For example, I remember looking at the involvement of the universities in the development of the other countries. I remember one, what we call scientific mission in Uzbekistan, promoted by the University of Cambridge. I will participate there to work in magnetism, in magnetic materials with the universities of Uzbekistan. And we say, well, why magnetic materials? Because the promoted was one working in magnetic materials, and then we call all the people there. And we stay 50 days in Uzbekistan, in Khiva, in Bukhara, in Samarkand, and in Tashkent, discussing with the people there about magnetic materials. And I can say that now, at least 10 persons that was there from Uzbekistan and the other countries have published later in magnetism. That is a very good, interesting issue. And there is another that maybe we can speak later, because we have also from Crue one program with Cuba, for example, for the development of Cuba with the Cuban personalities and so on. But we can speak later on that. Thank you.
We don't have a lot of time. Before opening the floor for the audience, I would like, if you have any question to your companions in the panel, something that would like to clarify, or would like you have some curiosity about the...
Well, I am always in connection with SDG 16 and the collaboration, the international collaboration of universities. I would be interested to know, how would you welcome international professors coming to your university, and how would you welcome your students going abroad? How do you think that would benefit the quality of, or the excellence of your education? And how much money do you have for that? And who funds it? And with which policies and what purpose?
Funds our internal budget? Or?
No, those exchanges.
Change programs. Well,
is it related with SDG 16 at all?
Mm-hmm. We are actually one of the only universities, we are private, but both public and private, that actively are involved in Erasmus. Yes. So we have a lot of both students and staff exchange programs, which is quite unique for Bosnia. The other main point is something I mentioned at the very beginning. When we started with SSST in 2003, it was actually Lady Margaret Thatcher who was one of the instigators of bringing a franchise of the University of Buckingham, which we in essence are, to Bosnia and Herzegovina, because she asked our politicians, okay, you know, so much has happened after the war, how will you rebuild? What are your main now ideas on, you know, because from 92 to 97, when there was a big technological industrial revolution, it completely bypassed Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we knew that we had to advance technology, we knew that we had to make up for this lost time. And she said, well, at that time, in 2004, Margaret Thatcher was actually the Chancellor of University of Buckingham. And she was the one responsible for bringing this university to Bosnia and Herzegovina. And what the contract that she devised meant that not only do we take the program of the University of Buckingham, but there is a minimum quota of 30% of British professors which have to teach. So through the University of Buckingham, through Erasmus, we are one of the only universities that actually fund themselves more through research because of these various experts than through actually tuition, which is the case of 80% of universities in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In the previous panel, keynote, you spoke about how third world countries are not in the 1,000 top times lists. However, in 2009, we actually wanted to audit ourselves because we do so much research, we have so many experts and so on. So we applied for a QS, you know, the Crowley-Simmons, and we actually came up, SSST came up to first in Southeastern Europe, or 571st in the world. So for such a small university, for such a young university, you can see that, you know, through multi-ethnicism, through trying to bypass the government if it is slow and if it is bureaucratic and if it has left us with this system, it is possible to implement change, it is possible to include all ethnic groups, it is possible to be on par with state and, world universities.
Carmen, I'd like to ask you, how do you think that, from your point of view, in the way you are working, could be engaged with the universities, from the point of view to transmit to the other countries all the problems of law for justice and for peace and so on? Could you break the relationship between your work and the work of the university sometimes, or not?
We work very, very closely with universities. So let me give you some examples. So one with the International Bar Association, we are doing actually a task force on the future of the legal profession, of legal services. And on this task force, we did a specific group on how to work with universities so that universities could hear what we have to say in the legal practice. And so we're working with 40 universities throughout the world together on building a specific curricula on addressing this. And in this task force, 50% of the material is on rule of law.
All right.
So this is how you link industry to NGO, because the IBA, well, although it makes a lot of money, it's a non-profit, with university. So that's one example. And with SDG 16, rule of law, which is what I work for. So that's one. Two, I think legal clinics is really practical, hands-on. I was very impressed. I don't know if someone in the public is here from Russia, but in 2017, I went to the All Russia Legal Clinics Conference, and I heard that legal aid is provided by the legal clinics there. So there, if you think of access to justice, which is one of the main targets of SDG 16, and the way universities are working on that target.
That's right.
It's massive, massive. Then you have to think of, whether students should be doing that or not. That's another story, and that's the legal profession to decide. But the collaboration where universities can actually deliver such a massive contribution to society is amazing. What else? The curriculum, what you're actually teaching. The message that the person from the UN was telling us yesterday in what to teach rule of law, and whether everybody, not only in law, but in other faculties, to understand basic human rights in connection to discrimination, in connection to the problems of the world, in connection with peace and reducing violence, in connection to human trafficking, in connection to everything that is described here. I think that's a massive role of university to raise awareness, to teach, and then to research. So I don't know if that's a reply.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I had other questions, but I think that it's time now for opening the floor for the audience. If you have some questions to the speakers. María José.
Okay, thank you for your contributions. I have a question for José Luis, because you underline that when we speak about transfer, it's not just about technological transfer, but also human, social aspects, and so on. But as when we work in different projects with, for instance, policymakers on these issues, as they are very intangible aspects, sometimes we need to work in a different way as researchers. So we need also to change ourselves and the way of working with them, because we learn that we need to generate some conditions on the context of the implementation of this research if we really want to have an impact on this. Because sometimes we wrote a report, but this report have not impact if we don't consider there are some conflicts among different departments, for instance, in the government and so on. So if we don't involve in trying to change also this context, it's very difficult to have this aspect. So my question is, which is your experience from seeing how different universities in Spain are trying to work the transfer on social sciences, humanities, and so on?
Well, we start the way now. We start the way. The first thing that we have made is to make a call for the sexenius of transfers. You know, sexenius is the name for the bonus of transfer of research before, and now is the sexenius for transfer. This is the first thing. This is the evaluation. It has been 16,000 calls, people. He asked for the sexenius. That means that there is a very interesting, all the people in that. This is the first time that we are open to all the parts of the university. I know that the transfer in technology is very easy to know. It's the patents, the orders, everything, no? Or the conference, the projects with the industries. But the transfer in humanities maybe is not so easy, and in law is not so easy, or in social science is not so easy. Then we must know the impact of these documents, of these words in the society. And then they are trying, I don't know exactly which is the indicators now, because there are a lot of indicators to analyze and to make this valorization. Then we are starting at that. This is just a pilot plan for the moment. But I think that's very important that the people know that the university is not only publish. It's not only publish. It's not only the publication. It's also publication is very good for science, of course, and for other things. We must publish, that's true. But we can do everything more. And we can make also in a social input of the university in the society. And in other countries and in the collaboration with other countries, which needs absolutely the effort and education of the universities. That is what I can say. I think that the way is starting, and I think we continue there. We will ask for the results of this pilot plan, but I am quite what you say, interested to know the results. Okay?
Yeah, if I may say something, I have seen a very deep research from universities that have then been used and mentioned and been the base of public policies. For instance, in anti-corruption and transparency, public policies, and also in the case of homelessness. So in many areas, actually, deep research of university has been the base for governments to actually produce national policies. So maybe that can be something that the university can use as a way to reinforce or give a bonus or something to researchers. But I've seen that very often, also as basis for international treaties or international documents that then raise up to international standards or soft law. So maybe that can be indicators for university to value research.
No, there is a list, a very big list of indicators. When we start to beginning to work on that, it was 400 indicators.
Okay, so it exists.
After we leave, only 30, you know. The beginning was a lot of indicators. We must wait to see what happened with that, because it depends also of the central government, what's happened with that. It continues the same, then I think that we are in the right way.
More questions from the floor? If not, I had one question, is that there are a lot of factors that influence the way in which some government, states more generally, deliver good institutions, justice, and general well-being for the population. And increasingly, we have foreign elements that influence companies. It is a huge field in the last decades. The influence of other governments. Do you find that there is a room for cooperation between universities in different countries to deal with this new situation, the situation in which the domestic policies are influenced by other external actors? You work on business and human rights, and more, I guess that there is a lot of about multinationals or.
But you're talking about research or specific projects, or?
Specific projects. It could be research, but it could be also lobbying for public policies that influence, perhaps not in your country, but in other spaces.
We have a number of projects in an effort, again, to strive towards this reconciliation. We try to find similar institutions in terms of their vision and mission in Kosovo, Albania, Montenegro, as well as Serbia, Croatia, and perhaps also Slovenia, where we do apply for joint projects, where we do joint research. And that further, as I said, builds toward that multi-ethnic element that is very important for our region.
And did it work?
It does. Some projects are extremely successful, some less so, but it's very hard when you are working for some institutions for the first time from different countries. But again, you learn from experience, and we now have a set number of institutions that we apply for on a regular basis through a varying different number of disciplines.
I think that we must be confident in science and in the scientific people. I think that the scientific people made his work quite well, and then the politician must believe in science. For example, you have the example of climate change. There are politicians that don't believe in climate change, but this is a reality. Scientifically, it's a reality. And then what we must say is the science is science. It's not politics. We cannot say the weight of this is 5 grams or 10 grams. We measure and it is 10 grams. We cannot say, well, maybe not. No, maybe not. Science is science. And then we must make that the politicians believe in science. After they take the resolution that they want, but science is science. And if the scientific, we don't say, always we say, well, the data, if we analyze the data, it seems that. We don't say, this is true. We say, it seems that it seems that for the scientists is a reality. But the politician did, it seems. Then it's not true. The scientists don't know exactly what they are doing. It's not true. Then I think that this is the case, that the science is for study the different problems that we have in the world and can assess about that. And the politician must believe in science more than they believe now.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that it is.
May I just a little thing. Coming back to your question, I think in order to have an international collaboration of universities, you need funds. So here comes the question of what does the funder want? So at the end, the mentality of the funder will be so relevant in in the science you produce. So this is why I come back to the earlier point of the collaboration, that unless the funder, the university, and the industry, if you're doing business and human rights or whatever at the end you want to do, unless you all want the same thing, you will end up doing science on what the funder wants, because you will apply for funds to whatever the funder wants you to research on. So in that matter, the lobbying is also very important on changing what the funders want to fund. And for university, this is so important as well in changing the agenda, in going before the public policies. This is why when we talk about public policies, I think university goes before public policies, not only after. Because with the awareness raising and the research, you actually lobby for changes of public policies. Sometimes it comes as well. But this knowledge and this thought leadership changes also the funders.
It must be like this.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you, and especially to you, three of you. It has been a great panel with a lot of topics, some hot topics that we need to discuss in the future. But yeah, I think that we have a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.